And then in January 2016, I just put a silly shout out on Facebook saying, does anyone want to come for a run? And honestly, it was freezing, horrible January evening on the seafront, and 6 people turned up. I couldn't believe it. And the following week, like 7 days later, 15 people showed up. And by the April, I turned up in my car and 29 people poured out of their cars. And I thought, terrifying, run away. But then we've gone from strength to strength.
Orbiting 250 miles above, the space station provides us with the ultimate view of planet Earth. From this perspective, we ask our guests to engage with 6 questions that orbit around wonder and stories of hopefulness. For the next few minutes, this is our Wonderspace.
Welcome to the 132nd episode of the Wonderspace Podcast. My name is Steve Cole, and over the past 3 years, I have asked the same 6 questions to amazing people from around the world. Questions that orbit around wonder and stories of hopefulness. We started during the COVID lockdown to enlarge people's vision and perspective and remind everyone that alongside crisis and emergency are always mind-blowing wonders of the natural world and hopeful stories that have the potential to fuel us and energize us, even in the most challenging of times. Before I introduce our guest this week, here is another 1-minute wonder from Ask Nature, who are part of the Biomimicry Institute.
Just as the human gut is filled with countless microbes helping to break down the food we eat, plants support and are supported by a microbial community swarming around their roots in a zone called the rhizosphere. The plant gives the bacteria a place to live and provides them with carbohydrates through its roots. In return, bacteria take atmospheric nitrogen and turn it into more useful forms for the plant, such as ammonia, nitrates, and nitrites. Various kinds of fungus can also grow between and within root cells, helping the plant to capture nutrients and water. And that's not all. When a disease organism starts to take over and harm the plant produces sugars, amino acids, and other chemicals that signal to beneficial microbes that it's in trouble. The beneficial microbes respond by moving in to attack the attackers or simply crowd them out. A better understanding of plants and their microbiomes can teach us much about cultivating healthy plants and about working with them to keep wider ecosystems healthy.
This week on Wonderspace, we ask our 6 questions to Jacky Youldon, who is the founder and director of RunningSpace. Their mission is to champion life and beat suicide one step at a time. Jacky struggled with suicidal thoughts following a lifetime of self-harm and eventually tried to take her own life. From this place, RunningSpace was born, and in 2019, Jacky was awarded the BBC Unsung Sporting Hero Award for her life-saving running groups. Jacky, it's so great to have you on board Wonderspace today. If we could do a fly past over any part of the world that is significant to you, which place, city or country would it be and why?
This one would be relatively straightforward to answer. It is literally where I live right now, little old Bexhill-on-Sea on the south coast of the UK. And it is because growing up, my whole life, I wanted to be a missionary. I don't come from a Christian family, but ever since I was like 3, ever since I could think, I always wanted to be on the mission field. But the mission field to me always meant wearing a headscarf and a long skirt and going really, really far away, somewhere hot, where you could only eat grubs, you know. And actually, it turns out my mission field is literally right here. And it's the joy of my life to live here and fulfill my mission right here where I am in Bexhill. And I live like 50 yards from the seashore. I'm in sight of the Seven Sisters at the end of my road. My community is right here. And that is why Bexhill-on-Sea right now, for me, would be my favourite place.
That's amazing. That's great. So, obviously we're rooted in where you are, but give us a glimpse into your life story so far, then with an emphasis on what you're doing currently.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for asking. It's exciting to be here. And I come to you today, really. I'm a 52-year-old mum of 4, a fairly, what you might call, well, I call a messy adventure of a life. And I'm a suicide survivor. And before I just go on to talk about that, I just want to say for anyone who's listening, I am a suicide survivor. I do know what that feels like. And I know that in any group that I talk to, there will be people listening who will have lost someone to suicide or might have thoughts of suicide themselves. So I would just encourage you that there is help out there, and to just talk to someone you trust, because that's the first thing and the safest thing we can do to help ourselves keep safe. So yeah, I'm a suicide survivor. But my story is not sad. It's a story of finding hope in God, and it's about finding hope and passion in my calling, as I've always wanted to know what I was here for. And back in, I think, 2015, I was really, really searching. You know, I'd had my children, 2 divorces later and all that. And I just felt like I was like Noah's dove flying around the earth, and I couldn't find a place to land. And I just found that really difficult. I didn't know what my purpose or my mission was. And then a very good friend of mine invited me along to a race, because I'm a runner. And it turned out that it was a race set up to raise awareness around suicide. And I came second, which is a shame, really. I should be able to say I came first, but I didn't. But in any case, everyone else thought I came first, so that was fine. And this friend just said to me, do you know, when you run, you're the pioneer of the downfall of suicide. And I thought that was ridiculous. And I cried and said, what on earth do I do about that? And she said, well, don't worry about it. Just start running, and people will follow you. But up to that point, suicide hadn't been part of my own story, interestingly. And then in January 2016, I just put a silly shout out on Facebook saying, does anyone want to come for a run? And honestly, it was freezing, horrible, miserable January evening on the seafront, and 6 people turned up. I couldn't believe it. And the following week, like 7 days later, 15 people showed up. And by the April, I turned up in my car and 29 people poured out of their cars. And I thought, terrifying, run away. But then we've gone from strength to strength. And I don't know which to tell first, really. The suicide part. So as I said, 6 months after that, suicide became part of my own story. And I found myself, somebody said to me, it was about an issue at work, actually. She said, well, can't you fight it anymore? And I suddenly felt, no, there is nothing left. I have no energy left to fight anything at all. And I just sort of felt hope drain away, really, which is really difficult. And they say suicide is a selfish act, but for me, it was like I was stealing everybody else's air by breathing. And so the next day I made my first attempt to take my own life. And do you know what? I don't regret it, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I wouldn't have the experience that I do now, that I bring to what I do now at RunningSpace, if I hadn't had that experience. So I'm grateful for every moment of it. And at that point, I started learning about what suicide is and what it isn't. And I'll just say this at this point, there's a myth that suicide is about wanting to die. It is not. Almost always, suicide is about needing help to live. And that's what we as a community can do something about. So after that, I set up RunningSpace, which was about teaching people how to run. It's about championing life. It's about beating suicide. And we do that by teaching people how to run in small groups that are based in community, including church settings, but not only church settings. We work with housing associations, schools, with the NHS to teach people how to run. And we use running as the platform to build faith, resilience, and relationship, which protect us and our communities against suicide. And just lastly, the story in 2019, we were awarded the BBC Sporting Unsung Hero award for our work, our quote, life-saving running groups. And we were flown up to Aberdeen and stood on the stage with Gary Lineker and stuff. So that's great. A real accolade. Yeah. So we're going from strength to strength.
That's amazing. And I love just reading an article on, I think it was Runner's World magazine, actually, about something of your work and the story of Steve, who came and was diagnosed with cancer and came through treatment and started to find your work. And just stories like that are so extraordinary and so inspiring, and the impact that you've had in many people's lives. But is there somebody that really stands out for you that's been part of RunningSpace?
Yeah, there's this beautiful, beautiful girl called Az. And actually, I was giving her a lift to that session where the 29 people showed up in April before suicide was part of my story. And she is exceptional. Her life journey has been really complicated and difficult. She struggled with alcohol. She struggled with severe self-harm. I asked her, she was brilliant because I was able to ask her questions like, when do people think about dying most? And she said, oh, well, it's Friday evenings on payday, when all the services have shut down, you've got enough money in your bank account, you've gone out to the pub, alcohol's an influencer, and all of those things. So she taught me a lot of what I know. But, she ran her first 5K with us, which was amazing. But you know what she does now? She's a flipping pilot, and she's an ambassador for her organisation that takes people up. And it's where she finds freedom and hope and treasure. And she's cracked alcohol. She is living life in all of its fullness. And I couldn't celebrate her enough. And it's not something that I've done for her. I've just, I guess been a little bit shoulder to shoulder with her, but so have others. It's a whole community response, and she's given it her all. And now she's a pilot. Yeah. What can you say? Yeah.
Amazing. With all these things going on in your life, where is your place of reset or recharge?
Yeah. This was one of the hardest to think about. And I think that's because it's elusive, isn't it? This reset place that everybody talks about. Everyone talks about it. It's one of the things we talk about and don't necessarily do. I want to put prayer up there because it's a priority, but I would say I'm still not very good at prayer or meditation or thinking about that. So for me, that's still a little bit, it's discipline rather than work at this point, but nevertheless, I still use it as my reset. You won't be surprised that running for me is resetting. And I was thinking about why that is. And it's partly because I'm away from stuff when I'm running on my own. I can't do anything. I can't do the washing up. I can't make a decision. There's nothing. Oh, I can make a decision. I can't do anything about that decision. I can't do anything. There's only one thing I can do, and that's run. And also nobody's judging me, not even me, for what I'm thinking while I'm running. So it tends to be a really creative space, and I can be really inspired. I mean, I went along the seafront the other day, and there were just two swans flying across the sea. You don't see that very often. And that was a beautiful thing. I kind of, a flip side, I love being on my own. I really get reset by being by myself. All right. But that's become a pride thing. And what I have realized in thinking about this question, and the issue of self-care, by the way, self-care drives me crazy. We talk about self-care all the time. And I'm like, I've been looking after myself all my life. Can't someone else do it? That's my frustration. And so pulling those strings together, honestly, hand on heart, a hug does it for me. So I come back to my partner and he gives me a 5-second hug and I'm like, okay, I'm safe again. And then in my office, I have this wonderful friend, Emma, and all she has to do, and it's unwitting, I don't think she does it on purpose necessarily, or maybe she does, who knows. And my back's to her in the office most of the time, but she'll come along, she'll put her hand on my shoulder and I feel it's like we're both saying, we've got this.
Yeah.
We've got this.
That's good. So important. Amazing. What wonder of the natural world excites you the most?
Oh, my favourite question. I love this. And I thought, flying over mountains and whatever. No, it's underground. Oh my goodness. My daughter and I went to the Natural History Museum, 3-4 years ago. And, you go into the museum, you think, the best thing's going to be the whale. oh no, the best thing is going to be the T-Rex. No, the best thing was the geology bit. Oh my goodness, the colours under the ground are utterly stunning. You think, I mean, you walk around in your garden, you think everything underground is grey. It isn't. It's spectacular in its colour, in its variety of shapes. It's absolutely beautiful. And I was looking through my phone pictures of the Natural History Museum, and there's this colour wheel of gemstones. Oh, and it's literally like the colour wheel that we all know and love, but made of stone. It's absolutely incredible. I'll tell you why this is important to me as well in a minute. But the pièce de résistance is there is this. They call it the Aurora of Hope, and it is 256 diamonds, all set in a triangle, and it's every shade of diamond in the world. And it's taken 25 years to collect. And yeah, it's called the Aurora of Hope. What could be better? And it looks different. If you view it under ultraviolet light, it looks a different colour than it does under normal light. And I must tell you, the reason I find this so thrilling to see stuff underground is that a lot of my work and a lot of my job I would describe as hunting for treasure. And there's this beautiful passage in the Bible, right? It's my favourite bit. And it's in the book of Job, which you wouldn't necessarily think is the favourite one because it's all about struggle and suffering. But there's this beautiful description of a miner who is mining underground. And if you can imagine this person, they're underground, their hands are bleeding because they are scraping at the rocks underground. They're really suffering. Not only that, they're suffering alone. And overhead, there are lions and they can't see. There are vultures and eagles flying overhead, and they can't see the suffering and the struggle of this person. They are hanging from the rock face. And that's what it can feel when you're struggling with suicide. But do you know what? That is where you find the treasure and the source of rivers. So underground, in this dark place of suffering, in this trauma, that is where the treasure is found. And that is why I love underground treasure. I love mining for treasure in myself. I love it physically. The natural things speak of the invisible, don't they? And I love running with people and digging out their treasure. It is the most beautiful thing that God has ever given me. It's precious. And don't forget, diamonds are made under pressure.
There we go. So inspiring.
That's my preach for the day.
No, that's so good. There's a book, again, just one of the most remarkable books I've written in the last read in the last 5 years. No, it's by Robert Macfarlane, and he's written a book called Underland.
Ooh.
And I just picked it off the shelf, and it's an epic exploration of the Earth's underworlds as they exist in myth, literature, memory, and the land itself.
Wow.
And it's at once ancient and urgent. This is a book that will change the way you see the world. And it's so in tune with what you're saying.
Wow.
You know, we know so much of what is above us, but actually we never think about actually what is underneath us. And as you said, the treasure that is found in this book is absolutely extraordinary.
Right.
So Underland by Robert Macfarlane. There's my
I've written it down.
The podcast.
I've written it down.
Fantastic. And a question that, again, we've loved asking the community so far is what is your story of hopefulness that's not your own, about a person, business or non-profit who are doing amazing things for the world? So who would you love to give a shout out to today?
There are so many. Okay, and I'll start big and then home in to my favourites. So we're members of the National Suicide Prevention Alliance, and I am delighted to tell you that there are 1,800 members of that alliance. So I know that there are at least 1,800 individuals and organisations who are fighting to beat suicide across this nation, and that's really exciting. But then I wanted to home into one of my favourite people on the planet, and his name is Gus. And he is one of the chaplains of the Beachy Head chaplaincy team. And he humbles me because when I think I'm doing something good, I chat to Gus. And he has a level and a depth of compassion that I just aspire to. I really do. And it's not a sort of it'll be okay sort of compassion. It's a strong, firmly rooted compassion. And I absolutely love his compassion and what they do every day, walking up and down that coastline, living life really genuinely on the cliff edge. I think it's spectacular what they do. And not only that, Jenny, his colleague there, she knows her numbers and she knows her figures, and she just is campaigning on behalf of those that are struggling. She works with the police, she works with the NHS, and she works with our politicians, and she is just fighting on behalf of those people who don't have a voice. I got two more. One is the mighty Jacky Youldon. And the reason I love her, so many reasons, but one reason is that she went, many of you will know her story, but she works since the 60s with the lost and the broken in the walled city in Kowloon in Hong Kong, which doesn't exist anymore, but she still works with the lost and the broken there. And I remember reading a line of her book, and she says she's walking through this dark passage into the walled city, and she felt it was home. And that's such a joy to me, that home isn't where, well, it's not necessarily where it's the sweetest place, but it's where God's called you to be. And so for her, that was home. And I found that so inspiring, the work that she does and the relentlessness of what she does. She's never left. She loves those people with this relentless love. And I think that marks her out. Then I have my mate Brian. See, I'd like to raise up big organisations, but actually it's the people, the individuals. My mate Brian, and he fights for justice in a completely different sphere from me. He used to be an investigative journalist in the city, and he talks a language that I can't comprehend at all. But it's almost like I feel we're doing a pincer movement for justice in this nation. And it's a community effort, isn't it? It's a community effort. That's the thing. If we all thought we could do it by ourselves, that would be a shame. But it's the fact that it's a community effort and we all do what we're called to do.
Yeah, so right. So we have come to our last question. This has been so inspiring. Thanks so much for being so open and honest with us. But our final insight, as we prepare to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere from this overview of Earth, what insight, wisdom, or question would you like to leave with us?
In my role, I talk about running and I talk about suicide, and both of those things are really difficult subjects to talk about. And when I invite people to come running with us, the reason people struggle sometimes is because they're afraid of coming last. And one of the things I love to tell people is that there are 100 ways to win when it comes to running. So you can, if you talk to runners, they run by going a little bit further or a little bit longer. So you might run for a few minutes more, or you might run for might do your time for a few seconds less. You might be racing against the person in front of you or the first person behind you. Your win today might be just getting here and getting your shoes on and getting out the door. But there's this beautiful poem that is called The Race. The author is unknown, and it's about a little kid that runs a race at school, and his dad is watching at the end. And of course, this dear little bloke who wants to win the race falls over. I've done that in races. You can read the poem, you can find it online, but the punchline of the poem is, winning is no more than this, to rise each time you fall. And I love that line. It means that we can run and we can beat suicide. Winning is no more than this, to rise each time we fall. So that would be my wisdom for the day, and it's something that I live by.
Yeah. Beautiful. Jacky, so inspirational. And to find out more about RunningSpace, to find out more about you, where do we go?
Right, yeah. To find out about RunningSpace, you can look us up on runningspace.org. Please invite us to deliver Safe Talk training where you are. Or if you're interested in starting up a Walk to RunningSpace group where you are, if you're interested in using the gift God's given you, your running, if you love running, then we can show you how to do that. There's really easy. The nice thing about it is it's free. Once you're trained to deliver it, it's free to deliver where you are. So it's accessible to as many people as we can reach.
Fantastic. That's been so good. Thank you, Jacky, for, again, just being such a force for good in the world and for the way that you've impacted people's lives in such an amazing way. And thanks for being honest and sharing your story with Wonderspace today. Really appreciate it.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
If this episode has hit a raw nerve, then as Jacky said near the beginning of the interview, there is help out there. Talk to someone you trust and pursue professional help and community. Wherever you are, there are individuals and organisations fighting to champion life and beat suicide. Thanks for listening.